Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black.
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.
Welcome to the Star Wars Canon Timeline Podcast.
And the Lorehound Star Wars Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Elysia, and today we ask whether Sol and Chimere teach or corrupt in the 6th episode of the Disney Plus Star Wars series, The Acolyte.
Listeners, for this crossover podcast series, we'll be following the apparently controversial Star Wars Canon Timeline Podcast spoiler rules. We'll talk some more about that in the feedback section, as well as the community's wildest and most popular theories and questions.
But first, we'll look at each of the two sides of this episode, throwing out the most likely theories about that new planet, everything on it, and what is going on with Sol and Vernestra.
We'll wrap it all up with a look at what's ahead on the Lorehounds Network this week. Check the link tree in the show notes for links to all the podcasts we host, plus our Discord where the Acolyte theory crafting is heating up.
And for the record, this conversation was recorded on July 4th, 2024. And
America!
Fuck yeah. You might have heard another laugh here. And yes, we have David back to share his hot takes. Hi, David. Thank you for stopping by.
John challenged me to come at him with all my strength, so I had to show up for
You were chucking cereal at me, so I said, come fight me on the pod.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, John and I are more defensive of this show than David's more in cereal mode, I guess. Is that right?
Well, and I think I was defending Athena Agilea's spouse, who had declared fan bankruptcy, and I was like, get that guy some cereal and have him enjoy. I'm assuming it's a guy. Apologies if my assumptions are
Pretty
incorrect.
sure she said husband.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a gendered term there.
Yeah, it is. It is a very specific gender term. So my point was, get that person some cereal, sit down, pull up a chair, pull up a bowl, and enjoy the show, because I think the show is worthy and worthwhile for super fans and casual fans alike. And I think that was my point. And John took exception at the fact that I think I was characterizing it as a Saturday morning pajamas show.
Yeah.
As opposed to a serious lore show where we really get into the details of the Star Wars extended universe.
I'm not saying that kind of show can't be bad. I'm just saying I don't think your cereal will cure it if it is bad. I think cereal, to me, a Saturday morning cereal show is a very specific type of show that is an adventure of the week. Not everything needs to make sense. Not everything needs to be so serious. It's okay to just, have your sugary cereal. It's part of that experience, right? It's part of that, lighthearted thing where you just can overlook some holes. I don't think that's a show. I think if you're not liking the show, the cereal's not going to help. That was my point.
I think
Dr. David's diagnosis and treatment plan was faulty.
Well, I was taking it as that I think there's more depth to this show and I think not everyone is connecting with the various layers that are making it so compelling for me. And I guess, that's okay. To each their own. It does seem like there are a lot of people who are, because we've got a ton of feedback today.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, so that means that, and as we know, engagement equals enragement, right? So if people are reacting, it doesn't have to be enraged.
They're not reacting in angry ways. They're reacting in like theory crafting ways, which is fun. People are having fun with this.
So it means it means that it's affecting people in some way. And people, like, if we're just like, oh, it's fine, then we don't respond. But if there's something we have to say, we get activated by something.
Yeah.
I would say that, I mean, it's a valid point in terms of what is a Saturday morning serial show. And we started using that term. John, I think you sort of coined that whole thing, which is like, oh, let go, have fun, and enjoy. And so I was thinking more about it in that level. I don't know the canon and the books and all of that stuff like you guys do. And I think there is a degree of the fandom which is also in that position where it's like, oh, okay, this is, there's some cool action here. There's some interesting characters. They're doing some fun stuff with Star Wars. They're showing us a time period. I really like the fact that we're not on a kind of hero's journey quest to find the MacGuffin that's going to overthrow the Empire story. But that we've got a mystery that's happening, and we're doing this kind of fun storytelling way of looking at multiple perspectives and doing some flashbacky stuff, all of which I don't think we've really seen in our Star Wars. And so I'm appreciating it on that level, and what planet that is and what kind of metal that is. And is this the first time we've ever seen a force saber whip thing, Sith, the history of the Sith? It's all blowing past me, but there is a logic and a consistency to it. So it doesn't feel like they're just making stuff up and throwing it on the screen. It feels grounded, and it feels like it knows where. I feel like as I'm watching it that Hedlund knows what the hell she's talking about. So I can just relax and eat some cereal and enjoy it, and not in a God, this is awful, but I can't stop watching. Like, no, this is actually really enjoyable. And for a non-core, for a fan who's not steeped in the literature, as we could say, I'm not an academic of Star Wars, I don't know that I'm missing stuff. And that means something good. They're telling a story that is speaking to me, and all of the lore details are blowing past me, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And I don't feel like I'm being, railroaded into having to learn the lore. I can just go along for the ride on this. Right. And I think that's great. And I'm really glad. And I also love to see all of the Star Wars haters out there. Well, there's got to what the origin of the Sith. It's like, yo.
No, that's fine. I will lore drop on them.
Yeah. But Leslie Hedlund is, and then I love the fandom. I love that the fandom has the ability to stand on 2 feet and go, no, actually, you're wrong. Go kick rocks. Because it's so steeped in the lore, and it's so well rooted. And I think for all of those reasons, I'm enjoying the show. It's not an Andor, of course not. It's in its lane. It's firmly in the lane.
It's not supposed to be an Andor, right?
Exactly.
That's the point.
Exactly. And it's great, and it's enjoyable. And for me, I could sit down Saturday morning and eat a bowl of cereal, and not in the way of like, oh, I gotta just like suffer through this. But I'm like, no, this is fun. This is like fun Star Wars. I like this.
Is it engaging with you on the level of the interpersonal conflicts and things like that? Is that drawing you in?
Not so. No, it's not drawing me in. I think what's drawing me in is the mystery is drawing me in, and how she's using the mystery to the way that she's using visual storytelling to unpack the mystery, or to figure out. That's what's really. And then Sol's performance, Lee Jun. What's his? I don't have his name on the top of my head. What's the actor's name?
Oh, Lee. She calls him JJ. Yeah, Jae-jung.
Lee Jung Jae, yeah. His performance is great, and I love seeing a bunch of new actors that we haven't seen before. So the acting and the script writing now, I know John, may disagree with me. I don't think that the script is all that.
I disagray with you too.
Yeah, I fully disagree with that. I think this is the second best writing in Star Wars, as far as dialogue goes.
How?
Next to Nemec's Manifesto and Andor.
Right.
I think that's the only dialogue in Star Wars that surpasses this. The conversations happening between Chimere and Osha. I keep having to remind myself which twin we're talking
Which
about.
one is which?
Right.
Twin is which?
I mean, it's literally the same actor. It's not even twins. So
Yeah, right.
and then the way that Soul is talking to May, I just think that these are the best conversations we've had. I see it as Andor. If we're comparing to Tolkien, Andor is about like the men of Middle Earth, and then the Acolyte is about the elves of Middle Earth, right? These like otherworldly beings that are Jedi and Sith that
Right.
are some ethereal
Right.
level above the other beings in this universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay for those to have two totally different dialogues.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. I think every character in this is a Force user, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah. So David, and by the way, full spoilers obviously for the episode we're talking about and every episode before it. David, we didn't get your hot takes on the last episode, which is the one everyone was talking about with the deaths and the lightsaber battles. And
that shocked me in that it was first we got Jecki, and then I was like, wow, that was wild. And then was it Jecki first, and then
yes.
Yord?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so the red shirts. They
went quickly. Yeah,
they went quick, no problem. But then the way that she amped it up with those two, that shocked me because clearly the fans are resonating with both of these characters, and she took not only one but two out, and that's something. And I think then when Vernestra has to show up later, and Soul has to deal with the loss of his whole team, that is some bold storytelling for Star Wars. We don't get a lot of on-screen deaths of major and minor characters. Red shirts aplenty, fine. But in terms of people that we're really resonating with and we want to hold on to, that was shocking. And I think it was really bold. And I appreciated it. And I also appreciate, I'm just laughing, getting the visual. I'm laughing because both of their death scenes, death, whatever, but they were so shocking, and she knew exactly what she was doing. And not only did she give Jecki this like kind of cool death in terms of the 3 puncture wounds of the thing, but then the way that Yord went down was just really, he got, that it was just wild. And for her to do that, I think is bold. And I applaud her doing that. And it ramps up some emotional stakes. Because beloved characters are down and out, gone. Right? That's something. So what are you going to do to us now?
This week they are dead. Yeah. There's no nope, they are dead. Yeah.
And that we see the whips or the scar and the whip in one episode. I don't think that's a mistake at all. I think that's a very intentional.
We're going to talk about that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And boy, this is a thirsty season of television. I was like,
I mean, people said that it was like going to be the gayest show, but then it's actually it's really the straight gays or gay male gays, but it's it's centering it's sexifying especially a male figure, which is somewhat unusual.
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe getting a red lightsaber after the end of this episode. I saw your comment, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good way to say it.
I feel like Michael Scott's going to run in and go, I'm coming out hetero.
So yeah, I'm really pleased with what's happening. I love that the fan reaction. I love the story. We still have to learn more about what's the Wookiee's name again? I apologize. It's early.
Kelnaka.
You can hear him in that song that I wrote.
Yeah, that's right. So we still have
Next week?
I know we've got some Kelnaka stuff coming up.
Yeah.
I hope we get back to the Coven and the witches at some point. We've got Saul being very sinister and ominous by taking Osha. Is it Osha on the ship? Or is it May?
May is with Saul right now, and Osha is with
May on the strapped in on the bed and all this kind of stuff. So I think she's building tension really nicely, and I think the last episode we had a lot of good moving around. Like we moved the plot forward, we opened up with some new stuff, gave us some new mystery, and answered some questions and opened up a whole bunch more. So from a pacing standpoint and the the plot delivery points, like I feel like we're moving along. At first episode, I was like, oh, I don't know. And this is cooking. I think she's cooking, and I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad that the Star Wars fandom has something that to rally around on a cause. Like, this is a good show. It's lore consistent, and we're having fun. So all y'all can,
No, there's a lot of fun
things.
Conversation going on online with the memes and the theory crafting and
yeah, Hot Lore Summer, right? It's happening.
Yeah, full on Hot Lore Summer. John, what did you think of this episode?
At times I was like, all right, get to the point. I do think that there were certain points, like we need 3 times for Soul to be interrupted when he's about to tell May. Like that was
the
a little
one
silly
annoying
to
thing.
me.
Yeah,
but really that was a minor quibble because most of it was really great. One thing that I thought was really interesting is that people before have said that the the dark side definitely lends itself to like desire, right? Because we're told that like attachments.
It lends itself to
the seduction
thirstiness.
of the dark side, yeah.
Right.
And yet, that's really good. I like that.
Well, that's what Leslie Headland cited that word is, especially. Exactly.
Yeah.
But no one ever talks about it because it's usually geared towards family-friendly movies. And here we have something where you can explore that a little bit. Andor went into that a little bit, but again, Andor is about the mortals of this world, not about the otherworldly Force users.
I like that.
Yeah. And this is the first time that we actually get a Sith going. He lists desire as
and he looks her in the eye and pops like a grape in his mouth or something. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Oh, I did my second watch with the audio description on, and like it is narrated like a romance novel during those scenes. Like his taut muscle, the scar traces a line across his.
I saw, I think, a tweet. Who's that big YouTube channel that does a lot of the breakdowns?
Which one? New Rockstars?
Yeah, New Rockstars. It was Eric Voss on New Rockstars. And I saw a tweet just scroll by saying, no, you have to watch it with the audio description. Yeah. He was like, do this. And so I was like, huh. And obviously I did. But now that you say that, that's great. I love it.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, I am impressed with like, I've done audio description like when I've watched stuff with Bob, and I am really impressed with how well they translate the visual into audio, the words that they choose and the pacing and the intonation. And yeah.
That's a lot of work. It's a whole separate mini production to be able to cue that stuff in correctly. To write
exactly.
it? I mean, you have to be a really good writer.
You have to do it around the dialogue and other sounds you need to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good work.
Yeah. So yeah, I love this episode. This was maybe my third favorite of the season so far. It was a necessary, last episode went at 11. So this is a necessary, downcycling, regrouping, realigning now that we've done the sister swap. Yeah, I had a really good time with it. And there's a lot of very interesting lore teases and also just the relationships between the characters are, in my case, that's really sucking me in. That's maybe even more than the mystery elements. What's getting me into this show are the characters and their relationships with each other and the mysteries around that and all that, and how might they develop.
Cool.
So I read a really great interview this week with Inverse. I shared that on the Discord. It was with Leslie Headland. And so I just wanted to share a few fun tidbits that I learned from that. And the first one is on the subject of the sexy Sith. Manny Jacinto first said no to the bare arms. Like Leslie Headland's like, I was surprised because he normally is like very easygoing about that stuff. But at first he pushed back. He didn't want to do it. But then, now here we are.
So, showing off his bare arms, you mean?
Okay. The sleeveless robes, right. Yeah.
No. I think if he had been robed, I think that whole question of being enticed, being seduced, being drawn by the dark side and what it has to offer, I think that would have been diminished. And I think by incorporating the physical sexiness,
right, I
think it elevates that whole conversation.
Right. I mean, and she knew exactly what the effect was going to be. I mean, she's I don't know if she's attracted to men. I'm not going to speculate on that. She's married to a woman. She's married to Rebecca Henderson, who plays Vernestra. But she knew, she was like, yeah, this is going to like make people go crazy, because she was saying, she basically is looking at all of us in the eye and saying, y'all are villain fuckers and you know it, and I'm going to show you.
What a statement.
Yeah.
Elysia, it's 9 a.m. where I am. I don't know if I can deal with that
yet. She's calling us out like that. Hey, I watch these episodes at 9 a.m. because they release in the middle of the night for me.
Right.
She also said in the interview that the stranger was originally going to be more in the background the first season and to tee up season 2. But after she saw Manny Jacinto's screen test, she's like, oh, no, people are going to be upset if I don't give more of him in the first season. So she said she rewrote one later episode, especially. Maybe it was this one. I just want to point out they keep saying Sith. So I still think, she also says there's a reason why we hear Kylo Ren's theme, but she does also keep saying the word Sith. And she said about Jackie's death that she said the reveal was not that it was Chimere. The reveal was just that, like, the reveal is that a dead body falls and you see this guy. The reveal is your favorites are going down. Welcome to your new favorite.
Nice. I like that. He's sweeping the table, and yeah, we want favorites and we want to root for him. People really love Jackie, right? That was a huge
right. And then we love the one who killed her,
even more. And so the setting up that conflict of like, oh, you just made me hate made me fall in love with the person I want to hate.
Yeah,
like with Gawain and Crispy Cole, it's like, okay, you made me like Crispin Cole for one hot second,
right?
Or Otto. There's scenes where you're
I
like,
don't know. I
Otto's...
still don't like Otto. This is House of the Dragon talk, by the way.
We're mixing. It's Hot Lore Summer. We're mixing.
It's Hot Lore Summer.
Our shows.
Yeah, and so I'll put a link to this article in the show notes for anyone who wants to read it for themselves. There's also a bit about the cortosis, which again, she emphasizes. She works with Pablo Hidalgo, who anyone who doesn't know, he's one of the most important people in modern Star Wars, because he's kind of like he's like the lore master, basically, the lore keeper, I should say. And so she worked with him to make sure it was all accurate. So that's why we see it so brittle that Jackie could elbow it and break it that way, because it has these incredible properties, but it shouldn't be this like super metal that's, undoes everything else. And also the fact that it's really rare.
Right.
And did we see a vein of it on the planet? Okay.
We did. So we know where he got it, and probably why he's hanging out there.
Exactly why he's there. That made a lot of sense. And then obviously I think the next big round of conversation is this what's the planet that Luke was on in the sequels?
Ahch-To, but Leslie Headland, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about it, but Leslie Headland came out and said it's not Ahch-To, the planet.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad it's not. I think that's too member-berry-y.
Well, I mean, you're trying to tie together. It would make a lot of sense if it were. I was slightly disappointed when I found out it wasn't, but I think so. I thought that they were going to combine Ahch-To with his planet from Legends, and now I think that it's just the planet from Legends, which is like an ocean planet where they mine cortosis, and it was an important place in the story of Sith Lords, Darth Tenebris and Plagueis. So it's called Baldemic.
Every time you say Ahch-To, I want to think Ahch-To, but that's a whole other...
Oh, stop it.
I just learned what that is. I didn't even know.
Oh, no.
Did you see the original video? Oh, it's funny.
Well, no, somebody showed me because I was like, I don't know.
You got to give him some of that Ahch-To.
Yeah. That Ahch-To. All right.
Can I just
cut me off? Kick me off of this.
Back to Star Wars.
Speaking of thirsty,
I think that every time we have a story set on one of the same 5 planets, the universe feels smaller. And this show,
I was gonna say,
is one of the first.
A Jedi dies. A Jedi does not get its lightsaber.
Look, I think that this show is a really nice breath of fresh air because it makes the universe feel bigger, not smaller. Right. I think especially if we have Chimere become not a Sith Lord, but instead a Sith fan. I think that would be a really cool way to expand the universe. Like, of course somebody would learn about the Sith, especially if they were part of the Jedi. Like that's in the archives, right? Like that knowledge is in the archives. Of course they would learn about it. Somebody's bound to like that idea.
Right.
And that's just more interesting to me. It feels much more realistic.
Right. I mean, I think that it's a combination of things. I think we'll get into when we get into the breakdown, but I think that maybe he was a Sith apprentice and is no longer, or I don't, there's a few ways that this could go.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes into Vernestra and why did, clearly there's a relationship there. Was he her Padawan?
But why do you say clearly? Because of the scar?
Yeah, and just in terms of mystery show plot setup stuff, she's not a minor character in the sense of she's some sort of faceless bureaucrat that sort of whatever. She's now showing up in the plot straightforward, like I got to go figure. I have to go. Not another rescue team, but I have to go.
Right.
She's
well, because
clearly
she feels bad. She sent Saul and the crew there to get killed. Yeah.
Right. And now she's and I think she's starting to see the pattern of Chimir's movements and saying, I feel some familiarities here. And so, I think the whip and scar are our first straight up clues to point us in that direction. But then just looking at the characters on the board, how can we put pieces together to make an interesting mystery? And so it just feels like, oh yeah, these two are potentially there. She's got to be powerful Jedi, right? And I believe she's got a lot of.
She's an extremely powerful. She's one of the most powerful Jedi that has ever lived.
And Chimir has power because when he flicked his fingers and knocked them all on their asses, that was some power. Right. Yeah. And so, there's just a lot of clues there that make me feel like there's a connection and did she screw up in some way and, or, what happened? So I'm engaged because I want to know why did these two come apart? What's dark in Vernestra that allowed Chimir to, taste that and to want to have more of it, or what did she do or stop him from doing or whatever. There's something there. And I think there's a darkness in Vernestra that has to be part of the cause of Chimir's path.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with everyone that of course the scar on Chimir's back looks like it could be a whip scar, although it forks. So it would be two whips. Or alternate theory, could it be a lightning scar?
Oh, he went crazy from the lightning. I mean, look,
like force lightning, like a Sith attacked him because maybe.
Right.
So he says he used to be a Jedi. So okay, we'll take that at face value. A long, long time ago, whatever that means, because he looks like 30. But
well, he could be using his force powers to keep himself de-aged. Is that a thing?
I mean. Haven't
we seen the opposite with the dark side though? Like usually the dark side really
corrupts the way you look. Yeah. So
but maybe he's different in some ways.
Yeah, or maybe I don't know. I have like mind transfer theories brewing in my head, or something that he's cloaking his appearance, or
The dark side of the Force is a path to many physiques. Some consider to be unnatural.
Yeah, so I don't know. He was definitely, let's say he was definitely a Jedi. If he says so, I have no reason not to believe him on that. But maybe he was already also a Sith and left or was rejected or thrown away, as he said in his own words. And now he's looking to start a new type of order, cue Kylo Ren theme song.
Which I think plays into some of the themes that we're dealing with in terms of the witches, and the Jedi coming in, and May and Osha, and we're going to make you a Jedi, and you're going to come in, and it's like, oh no, you washed out, bye. Right, and it's like now it's like, okay, but why? And then she's dealing with the whole thing's like, well, why aren't you a Jedi? Why didn't you complete your training? Well, I failed. Right. Did you fail, or did the Jedi fail you? That's I think there's something really interesting there as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we get into discussing? I know, David, I think you...
I'm going to head out. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I got to go blow some digits off my hands and celebrate our independence from the British.
You make sure you keep that emergency room on speed dial.
100%. But thanks for letting me stop on, John. John threw down the gauntlet, so I had to come at him. So,
well, thank you for stopping by and sharing your thoughts. It's good.
I'm glad the show is firing on multiple cylinders, and I'm glad for our community. I'm glad for the fandom, and so 100%.
Yeah.
All right, talk to you guys later.
All right.
See ya.
Okay, so John and I go forward with episode 6, Teach/Corrupt. So we've got that slashy episode thing again.
Yeah, I kind of like it. Like it is a unique thing for this show.
Yeah, no, I like it. But then, of course, then I ask, like, what does it mean that some have the slash titles and some have the solo titles that obviously link up? So we're still waiting. I still think next week we're going to get free will or choice, as you said.
Yeah.
But Star Wars Explained, I think it was, pointed out that the titles are one word when the sisters are together in the same place. So maybe that's it. That seems plausible.
I like that.
So the writers credited for this episode are Leslie Headland and Jocelyn Bio. And Leslie Headland, of course, is the showrunner. And Bio is a playwright turned TV writer and producer who worked on Russian Doll, which Headland did. And she's got a habit and much of other stuff. And the director this time is Hanelle Culpepper, who's best known for her episodes of 90210, Parenthood, Criminal Minds, Revenge, Grimm, and lots of Star Trek stuff like Discovery and Picard.
Nice.
Yeah. So for this one, the action is basically split between two different locations with two sets of characters. So let's just focus on one set at a time and then do a little Vernestra interlude.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we've got part 1 is May and Sol, and then Basil and Pip were also there. And do you think this is the teach side of things, or do you think they're trying to suggest this could also be the corrupt side of things?
I don't think she's teaching it. I don't think he's teaching anything right now. So I think perhaps corrupt, but it's not soul corrupting. I think it's Osha trying to corrupt the ship.
Or May trying to corrupt it. Yeah. Fake Osha. Fosha.
Right? She's like, I don't know how to do this. Let me reset. Well, she basically killed Osha's droid.
Yeah. Did May kill Pip? Because if so,
I think May killed Pip.
That's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, she just killed her droid. Oh, what if I factory reset you? And it was so casual too.
Yeah. I think she didn't realize until later when Saul's like, Osha always loved that droid. And she's like, oh, and he's not even on the right body. And yeah.
I wonder if that'll be like the last straw, because think about it this way. Osha, we've heard multiple times, including from Soul this episode, that Osha's really attached to that droid. If that's Osha's last attachment, right, that she's going to lose now, is that grief going to fuel her fall to the dark side? Yeah.
I do want to just point out there is something that happens later in the timeline where a favorite protocol droid, who we all know and love, he gets reset because they want him to be able to access the Sith language, which is forbidden otherwise. And his eyes turn red.
Is that why?
Yeah.
Oh.
His eyes turn red like we see Pip's turn red in this. And sorry, minor spoiler, but like that turns out okay. So there's hope.
Okay, so I wonder if it's like I'll put you into factory mode, but there's still like your memory bank somewhere. You just can't access it right now.
Maybe there's a backup in his body or something. I hope. I don't know. She looked pretty emotional when she lost the head, so I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. But this is definitely the thing that May has done that I'm most mad about.
Yeah, it was pretty cruel. And for what?
Yeah, exactly. So for this one, I just took like brief synopses from StarWars.com, the official synopses, and then we'll get more deeper into like the lore and key lines and things like that. So StarWars.com says about this part, nothing is as it seems. Jedi Master Sol plots a course for Coruscant after making a harrowing escape from the tragedy on Kofar. But there's an impersonator aboard the Polan, May, disguised as Osha. Just as they're about to jump to light speed, the ship's power fails, sending quote-unquote Osha off to put her non-existent mech-neck skills to good use. After evading Pip and Basil, who sniff out the ruse, May plans to beat Sol to his confession, trying to long-range comms to inform Coruscant about the truth of what happened on Brendok. But the Jedi Master stuns her, promising to finally tell her his Brendok story next week. So, John, I have to ask, how are your suspicions after this episode?
Again, I don't think he directly did anything wrong, but I think he participated in the cover-up. He was an accessory after the fact.
He says, time for me to face the High Council to tell them everything. So he feels like he has something to tell, but this is also, and like, I feel dumb saying this after we were like, oh, they're putting too hard at Chimera. He can't be the Sith Lord, which I still think he's not the Lord, but yeah, it feels like with Soul, like he's feeling guilty and they're trying to make us wonder if he's guilty, but maybe this is a misdirect. And it's like he's a little bit guilty, but not like, you know.
Right. I think part of it is he probably felt like it wasn't his story to tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this was really the story of the other Jedi who did the wrongs.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And we know that this Jedi Council is about to face an audit and they hate transparency. So I think that if we're gonna play that game, I think perhaps they knew about some kind of threat like Chimera, maybe not Chimera himself, but like Chimera that was on Brendock, and they hid it because they knew that nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody wanted to actually address it.
Well, I think the senators, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the senators that they're talking about with this Jedi audit, I feel like this is setting up, leading into the separatists that appear in the next era.
Okay. All right. I'm into that. I like it.
So we get, so by the way, Saul, he calls out emergency code 0, and this is a critical distress signal for the Jedi. So this is like, emergency code 0 is just like, this is the ultimate max emergency call, SOS.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Makes sense, though.
Yeah. So do you think like the whole thing where Saul, he turns off his tracker and leaves, I think he heard, like, they were having disrupted communications back and forth. But I feel like he heard her say, stay there, and then turned off his tracker and left immediately. Did you get that sense too? And why, do you think?
I think maybe he didn't know it was May at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then he later decided, well, now that I know it's May, I'm going to have an audience with her before they get here. Because we see that right after he goes away, the Jedi get there. You know, the hyperspace is fine. You know what I thought was interesting was Vernestra is so nervous about flying into hyperspace. Is that because she was so involved with the Nihil stuff?
No, it's because she, when she was younger, at least, when she was in hyperspace, she would sometimes get these visions, and she didn't enjoy the experience of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was a fun little Easter egg for book readers.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if I still think that Saul knew it was May the whole time, but he only knocked her out when she was like going to make the call, and he was like, no, okay. But I think he, like, obviously he called her out with Pip the droid, but I think even when he sent her to fix the ship, he knew, like, this is not the Mechneck sister.
Right.
That's my interpretation.
Right. Yeah, maybe that was a test.
Right? Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like.
Like, he could fix the ship himself, but he's like, okay, let me see if that's actually her first.
Right. Does Saul even know that Basil's on the ship? Because it seems like Basil's always flitting around in the background and not like interacting with him.
Yeah, could be. I don't know.
Do you think that Basil caused the power outage to lure May so he could try to attack her, which was adorable and ineffective?
I could see it. Basil is smarter than we want to think, right?
Yeah. Well, I love that, like, he and Pip were kind of squabbling like kids the first time they met, and now they seem to have done a team up.
Right. That's pretty funny.
Okay, so meanwhile, while this is going on, we've also got Vernestra, who's she goes back to Kofar with a mission team and makes a startling discovery, which is basically a bunch of dead bodies.
Yeah.
So we talked about whether the light whip might be connected to the scars. We definitely see when she pulls it out, like, she attacks an umber moth that was like just entering the clearing behind her. So the force is still strong with this one.
Yeah, she just senses. She didn't even look at it, basically.
What'd you think of the light whip?
I thought it was very cool. I want to see more of it. I didn't see enough. I didn't get enough.
Yeah. It was very cool to see it in live action. It is from, obviously she designs this when she's younger in the books. We've talked a lot about it in previous episodes, so I won't go too much into it, but like she can switch it so it's either a steady state, like a regular lightsaber, or this flexible whip type thing. And yeah, the light whips, this is not invented for the High Republic. It comes from legends. Although there are in the High Republic novels, there's mentions of Night Sisters having light whips. So I want to see that now. But it is interesting. It's purple. So that makes one of two people we know with a purple lightsaber, her and Mace Windu.
Ooh, that's a good point. And, of course we have that debate of like, is the legend saying that it's like partially light and dark? Is that still something that's canon?
Yeah, exactly. We see her doing something else that's very familiar from the Jedi games. She's got psychometry skills, it seems, where she walks around and can like sense the Force echoes of events that happened in the places.
Right.
Did that give you flashbacks?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's straight up a whole mechanic in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's a fun Easter egg. I don't know if fun's a word. There's an Easter egg that I only found out in the Star Wars databank, but her ship that she travels there on, it's called Kantaros, which Imri Kantaros is the name of her Padawan in the High Republic books. So those particular books are set 100 years before this. So regardless of what happens with Kantaros in those books, that character he was human. So that character would probably be dead by now. But just very interesting, a little Easter egg there for that, or something more. I don't know. We'll hear theories from people and the feedback. What did you think of, I don't know if it's her new Padawan or he just works for her, but Mog Adana, what did you think of the new Not Yord?
The new Not Yord, you said?
Yeah, he made me miss Yord. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy serving. Oh, I'm really suspicious. Like really, really suspicious. I think the way that he's like, oh, you're coming with us, so I don't know if you should come with us. I was a little suspicious of that. I'm more suspicious of him than I am of Vernestra, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I just he rubs me the wrong way, but like in the way that Yord did, but it makes me be like, oh, you're the wish Yord, you're the Yord we have at home. You're not the good Yord. It makes me want Yord back. But it's like that same sort of, well, actually, personality.
Well, poor Yord. He's gone. He's confirmed dead.
He's confirmed. He was looking rather pale. Yeah.
Yep.
A fun Easter egg about Magadana is that his first name is named after the script supervisor, and his last name is named after the director of episodes 3 and 7. Koradana. Yeah.
That's fun.
You know who else has a fun name? So we saw her on her little Skype call with a species called an Abednedo, which we'll talk about in a second. But this senator is called Isedawa Chuwant, or as it's more properly pronounced. It is actually named after that lyric. He's actually named after that lyric. Every Abednedo is named after a Beastie Boys lyric. So we've got the first one was in The Force Awakens, Elo Asti, named after Hello Nasty. We've got some other ones that are, and this is all like the Pablo Hidalgo. He's the one who's like, okay, you. So the first one was because J.J. Abrams, who was directing The Force Awakens, loves the Beastie Boys. And so Pablo Hidalgo was like, let's take this joke and run with it. And so he named all the rest of them after that. So anyway, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
The Abednedos, so they look like mammalian, like catfish people, because they've got these like flat faces and mouth tendrils. And they were originally underdwellers who evolved to live on the surface. And they are actually like really intelligent. They are curious linguists. They live in chaotic cities. So they actually seem like cool people to hang out with. They're just like this species that shows up in the background a lot of the time.
Yeah.
There's one in Young Jedi Adventures, a pirate with a redemption arc, and anyone who's seen the show who asks which pirate with a redemption arc is forgiven. So the name, do you know the name Abednego, like from biblical references?
I don't remember it at all.
So Abednego is apparently like at one point in the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar II, the king of Babylon, he threw 3 men into a fiery furnace, 3 Jewish men, who for refusing to bow to the king's image, and they were saved. And the king saw 4 men dancing in the flames, with the 4th being the Son of God. So that's where the name of the race comes from, because that name is name dropped in a Beastie Boys song.
Huh.
Yeah. Who knew?
Yeah.
There's also there's another like actual fishy species seen in the background a lot in this show called Selkath. There's one particular character who keeps showing up. So just that is a completely different species. The Abednego are mammalian. The Selkath are fish. So that's our entry into the Star Wars databank for today.
Fair enough.
But I do wonder, this whole like Senator Rey in court, could that be a seed for next season? Because she made a point of saying the name several times and that he's never been a friend to the Jedi. So I'm wondering if that's setting up a season 2 story.
Yeah, I don't know. I think as we get closer to the end of season 1, I'm like, what questions are we leaving open? Because I think it might be a lot.
I feel like we're nearly to the end of the questions, but I guess it depends. Yeah, because every question you answer, you open up more. Like the more we learn about Chimere, the more I want to know about Chimere.
Right, exactly.
And I don't think we're going to get all the answers on him this season. I don't think that was because he wasn't even supposed to be this big a part of this season.
Right.
So, by the way, the part of space that they're talking about where the senators are like banding together to say we need to look into the Jedi, that's called the expansion region, and that's between the inner rim and mid rim. And so this is a different region of space than we talked about at the beginning of the series. And there was Corpsec, where the Nemoidians were suddenly wanting to have shields repaired where they never had shields before. Mm-hmm. These are 2 vastly different regions of space, not really near each other. So very interesting. Makes me wonder if there's something wider going on that the Jedi are overlooking.
Right. I'm suspicious.
Yeah, I'm very suspicious. Do you have the sense that Vernestra has an idea who's behind this whole thing?
Yes. I think she suspects Chimere. I do think that it's very possible that was an apprentice of hers.
Mm-hmm. She says something to tip the scales, and that seems to be in reference to something only she knows and the audience does not.
Right.
She didn't exactly defend Saul when Moggy asked about it, did she?
No, she didn't. And I wonder if she's going to she was very quick to blame Osha, right? Like she'd been looking for a fall guy for this the entire time.
Yeah, I'm worried for Saul. I think she knows it's not Saul, but I think she might set him up to take a fall.
Right. She just, I think less so than, less so than the fact that she's a Sith Lord. I think that it's possible that she just wants everything to go away, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's what it is too. And I know book readers are like, oh, but she was a hero. But yeah, I think you can also see the roots in her younger story of how she would end up becoming. So many people become what they want to avoid. They become their parents. She becomes her parents in a way, but it takes her. She's been alive for what, like 150 years now or something, or more than 100. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, shall we take a quick break and then come back and get into the Osha and Chimere side of things?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Okay, so the other side of the episode, Osha and Chimere, or Disney seems to really, Lucasfilm seems to really want us to call Chimere the Stranger, but nobody calls him that. Yeah,
it's just not the Rings of Power. Can we just be honest with ourselves? Let's enough of these mysterious titles. Just name people names.
Yeah, well, he says he doesn't have a name yet. But he uses Chimera like as an alias, but I think it's because his name's going to turn out to be Plagueis or something. I don't know.
His name's going to turn out to be like Bob. Like he's like, this is the lamest name.
He's like, my name is what was the one from Ahsoka? Malik or Marek? Marok.
Marok, yeah. No, his name's going to be like Paul, Bob, David, John, something basic.
He says he doesn't have, if he's so old, maybe he's lost his own name to himself in some way, or he distanced himself from it, or.
Yeah. Who knows?
But okay, so the StarWars.com official summary of this part is, meanwhile, the real Osha awakens on an unknown world where someone has been tending to her wounds. Unmasked, the stranger begins to educate the former Jedi Padawan on his philosophy on grief and the power of the dark side, attempting to seduce her to his cause. So, credit to Abby, who called out she's the one who first found the name of those little creatures we find on this unknown planet. They're called the Skura.
The Skura?
Skura, something like that, yeah.
And they're not the same as the... they're not the same as the ones on Luke's planet.
No, the Porgs. Yeah. They're not... Well, so on Ahch-To, there was which is a location for anyone who doesn't know that shows up in the sequel trilogy. We talked about it in the Dawn of the Jedi and other overview episodes in the Canon Timeline podcast. But yeah, so there's the Porgs there, which fine, they could not show up. But we know this is not the planet. I'll tell you why in a minute. But there is on that Ahch-To planet these Thala siren, which we see a character milking at one point for like a turquoise milk. And those look kind of like bigger versions of these Skura, but I think they are just completely different animals, maybe biologically related.
Yeah. Who knows what's related in Star Wars? Everything's made up and the points don't matter.
The script description says they're part anteater, part duck. The Skura.
I like it.
They look like they camouflage as rocks. Like at one point, Osha walks by and they just freeze until she walks by and they pretend to be rocks,
Yeah.
And they're like nuzzling each other like little turtle doves. They're cute.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so they definitely labeled every other planet that we've been to in this show, all the ones they made up and, regular ones, like ones we've seen before, like Coruscant. Except this one, they make a point of calling it the unknown planet. And Leslie Headland, she admits it looks like Ahch-To. She said, "It's not Ahch-To. I know it's similar, and it was intentionally supposed to be similar in terms of terrain and feeling isolated and surrounded by water and less lush green and more rocky. But the idea is that the cortosis is mined on this planet, so I don't think that's the case with Ahch-To. Part of the reason that this is his home base is that cortosis is a very rare metal. I don't think we say it explicitly in the show, but that's the reason it's not Ahch-To. So yeah. So it's not Ahch-To because Ahch-To is not a cortosis planet, of which there are very few. And it is filmed in a different place. Ahch-To is filmed off the coast of Ireland, and this is filmed on Madeira.
Okay.
Which I really want to go to now because most of the show is filmed on Madeira. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So I don't know if you remember, John, there was a Clone Wars little story sequence about a cortosis mine that gets destroyed. That was on a planet called Mokivj, if that's how you pronounce it. But most people think that this planet could be a planet that's only been in legends so far, called Baldemic, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And Baldemic is described as an ocean planet with rocky tropical islands and in the outer rim. And it's mostly the people who visited there were there like for science and also for the cortosis deposits. And yeah, it happens to be where the story between the Sith Lords, Tenebris and Plagueis, came to a head. In Legends. So could play the same role here.
Yeah.
If it's the same.
Yeah. Huh. I'm into it. I'm like this. You're selling me on the lore here.
Yeah. No, I think it's fun. I love because like David said, it doesn't take anything away if you're not like, I don't know, it's just a planet, whatever.
Yeah.
If you think of it like that.
And I'm glad that you brought up Cortosis because I did not remember it from the Bane books. And, you know, and it's even name dropped in this episode, right? Like they finally said it.
Right.
And I the minute I heard that, I felt you in my mind, my force bond with you. I felt you point at the screen like Leo in that meme.
Yeah, see? It's real.
Yep.
Did you also notice that both sisters, so of course Osha now has one of May's knives, or probably more, because May seems to just have endless knives, but they both approach each other's masters with a knife. Do you think that it's like showing they're more alike than Osha thinks?
Yes. I think that she would like to, I think both of them deny their parts of the other one that are in them, right? Like one of them wants to be fully dark, one of them wants to be fully light, and neither of them are.
I don't know that Maya wants to be fully dark. She wanted to be with fully with Osha, and that was with Osha was like, that's too much.
Okay, fair enough.
That's my interpretation, at least.
Fair enough.
I don't know about you, but I need to know why Osha left the order. And I hope I'm sure they're eventually going to tell us, but I hope that that's one of the mysteries we get resolved in the next 2 episodes.
Yeah, I hope so. I couldn't see them, moving that to next season. I think that's too much.
Right. They teased it too much, right?
Right.
Yeah. Chimeras, of course, he loves to play on like, this is how emotional abusers treat people in real life. They're like, oh yeah, no, they all rejected you. Nobody else will love you like I love you, baby. Why do you still think of yourself as a Jedi? You have more in common with me. I'm the same as you.
I like it.
What did you think of his responses to her getting mad about him killing her friends?
I mean, he's so much, as much as the Jedi say we don't feel the emotions, he's way more cool and collected than they ever are. Like even Soul has a fucking meltdown on the ship.
Yeah, true.
Like he is on the struggle bus.
Yeah.
He is really just having a hard time. And yeah, I think Osha sees that May sees that.
No, it's Osha.
It's so
He's
different from her
now.
master.
Yeah.
No, I meant Soul is on the struggle bus.
Right. And May sees,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
May sees more remorse in him, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think Osha, she accepts it pretty quickly what Chimera says to her. She's like, you killed Yord. He's like, a man who doesn't hesitate to turn you in for a crime you didn't commit. And it was like, she was like, okay, fair. She didn't say that, but it felt like that was her response. And then she's like, more mad about Jackie, which to be fair, I'm also more mad about Jackie. But and then where did you think that was going to go? It would have been a one-sided relationship like your master. Why do you love people who can't go as far or deep as you can?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Why do you love people who are less than you? He asks.
Right. Because she says so.
Yeah. But he manages to provoke her anger. And we see her flex the force. Like, he tells her, apparently we learn that, like, I'll get into this in a sec, but apparently the force is fading with her because it's been atrophying because she hasn't been using it. But now he says the shortcut is to just like feel dark emotions and use that side. And she can now ignite the saber. It's the first force thing we see her do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the whole seduction angle. You get more flies with honey.
Yeah.
There's an interesting juxtaposition where we hear from him. He says, I lost everything. When you lose everything, you are finally free. And then May says to Saul, when you really want something, it can cloud your mind. You see what you want to see. And that feels like what she said about that as much about the Jedi as a Sith, but like she's coming out of that clouded mind and realizing that Chimera was manipulating her.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to see one fall into the seduction of the dark side and the other one get out of it.
Yeah, passing each other like ships in the night, or like ships coming and going from Kofar.
Yeah. And I'm still very curious how this force dyad stuff is going to work out, if this has anything to do with that.
Well, he says that she asks him, what do you want? Well, so he says, let me see, where is it? I made a mistake with May. I thought she wanted more than just revenge. I thought she wanted what I want. And Osha says, well, what do you want? He says, the power of 2.
The power of many.
Yeah. Power of many. So the power of two, of course, it crawls back to the witches, but the power of two is also, of course, the rule of two, the Sith thing.
Right.
And also why, I think he does want to create a Force dyad. So I don't know if he wants to create one between himself and one of the twins, or if he was trying to manipulate one that might already exist between the two of them.
Right.
Because I feel like he knew Osha was alive before May did.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he hid that from her deliberately.
Yeah. What did you think of the helmet meditation sequence? The sensory deprivation tank of the helmet.
Oh, I absolutely, she was going to pick it from the beginning. Like, she was just curious, like, what can I do? And she has been very, 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 what do I want to say? She's been very, very less than her sister her whole life, right? Like, her sister has always been the powerful one. And now she is finally getting an opportunity to be something more. And that's interesting. That's something that is a temptation that I think she's going to fall for.
Yeah. It is interesting because, like, they're using the same tools, like meditation, to clear your mind, which you could. It's as light side as it is dark side, but we find that in Star Wars storytelling and probably in life, when you're left alone with your own thoughts, like we see when there's a trope in Star Wars where Jedi go into a cave and they're confronted with the dark side. But also, it's as Chimera says in this episode, when you're in that state, it's just you and the Force and what you bring with you. So you're bringing that dark side in, confronting that side of yourself.
Yeah.
I found it, I thought the filmmaking was very both like calming and unnerving,
Yeah, it was. And yeah, I don't want to put that mask on. I would be very frightened.
Yeah, you can't see it all. He was doing all that stuff without fully being able to see.
Yeah. That's insane. That's insane to me. But I saw a tweet, and you're going to have to bleep me, but Chimera walked so could run.
Oh. So yeah, that's just a blind Jedi from later in the timeline. So how long, when Chimera said he was a Jedi betrayed by his master a long, long time ago, I can still remember. Anyway, how long ago do you think he means? Like, that makes it. It seemed like he was emphasizing it. Like, not. It felt like more than like when I was a kid. It felt like centuries ago. But I've been frozen or in stasis in a bacta tank. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and I don't know. It could be just that he sees his childhood as long ago, or we could have some crazy, body transfer stuff going on, like you mentioned earlier. And I don't think we've ever seen a successful body transfer, right? In the visual media.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, if the one at the end is deemed successful or not, but it's definitely something they're going for. So it could be, I mean, because there's a lot of things that the Jedi and Sith were capable of that become lost arts later in the timeline.
Right. Mildly interesting, right?
Mildly interesting. Wait, what was it? Somebody said, somebody had a good word for it in the Discord, and I can't remember who it was or what they said.
It was Raffo, and we've
no, but it was something else. No, somebody else said something else. Anyway.
Oh, that's some hot lore?
Yeah, no, it was another one. Anyway.
The wheel weaves?
No. It wasn't wheel specific.
One day we'll figure it out.
It had a lore in it. We also find out that Chimera says he's not reading people's thoughts, he's reading their emotions. And I bring that up because I already mentioned Vernestra's former Padawan, Imri Kantaros. And it just seems interesting to note that he had like an extreme version of empathy was his sort of Force talent. So it caused debilitating mental pain when he was dealing with other people's emotional states. Imri was a blonde, and this is a recently released book and, really recently released material, and they're not he definitely does not look like Chimere, just putting that out there. But it is interesting that they both talk about this emotional connection and maybe have a connection with Vernestra.
Right.
What did you think about? There's lots of questions we've gotten about this comment that Osha said about the Force fades if not exercised.
That's a great question. And I was thinking about that. I was like, have we heard that before? 'Cause I don't
Not
think
really.
we have. I mean, maybe we've heard that you get out of practice, but that's way different than saying like your ability in the Force fades.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially she's only been out of the Jedi Order 6 years, right? That's not that long.
Right. Well, it is. I guess it is when you're 20.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's true. A long time ago.
Right.
But I wonder, I do think that they are setting up overall, like, we know that the Jedi the Force becomes more clouded for them a century after this. And the Jedi become more conservative and institutionalized. So it feels like they're kind of setting that up, and how maybe their lack of, doing these great feats with the Force they used to do caused them to atrophy.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't see it later.
Yeah. I don't know.
So there are two explanations for this clouding of the Force that happens in the next era of the timeline. One comes from, and both of them tie back to this point in the timeline. So one comes from Legends, one comes from Canon. The one from Legends says that in 150 BBY, the Sith Lord Tenebris, and later working especially with his with his apprentice Plagueis, tore a hole in reality, basically, letting more dark side leak in. And then the Sith, for the next century, just kept continually expanding that tear until it clouded the light side of the Force by the time of the prequel trilogies. The canon explanation comes from the High Republic book Light of the Jedi, which is the first book a lot of people read in the High Republic reading. It's the first adult novel in Phase 1, which is actually the second era chronologically, but anyway, we went through all that in the High Republic episodes.
I just read this book, so it's fresh in my mind at the very end of that book.
So you remember? Do you want to read the quote?
Oh, sure.
So it's from Marchion Rowe, who is the head of this, of these Nihil super pirates that we've mentioned, and he's taken Loden Greatstorm, who is a Jedi who showed up in Young Jedi Adventures. He's taken him captive and says,
"Is he young in Young Jedi Adventures?"
No, he's there he's there with Bell, his Padawan, who's hanging out with the kids. Yeah,
gotcha. My family knew all about you people. They told me what you could do and how to resist it. He gestured vaguely toward the other cells filled with tortured prisoners. They're not getting out either. If they die, I'll just bring in more. Their job is to fill this entire deck with pain and anger and fear. Makes it hard for you to think, doesn't it? Hard for you to call on the Force. He leaned back against a nearby wall and crossed his arms. My grandmother told me how to do it. She learned from hers. You don't imprison Jedi behind bars. You do it with pain.
Yeah.
So who's Marta on that chain? You know,
the grandmother, right?
The single grandmother. It was probably the grandmother's grandmother, right?
No, I think 100 years.
Said she learned it from
100 years, right? Well, no, yeah, but and then she passed it on, yeah.
Yeah, but it says my grandmother told me how to do it, and she learned from hers.
Right.
So the first one in that chain of knowledge has to be Marta, based on.
Okay, but there's 100 years in between, so is there? But anyway, they're passing it down through the Rowe family, and these are not Force sensitive people themselves, so it's not the same as Chimere, but it is like this philosophy of you basically distract the Jedi with echoes of pain in the Force.
Right. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. There was also in the High Republic, there was a Transdoshan Jedi, which is like Transdoshans are like lizard people who are especially known for they're often slavers, and they often had Wookiee slaves. So Wookiees like to rip their arms off, but that's neither here nor there for this. But there's a Transdoshan Jedi named Seeker who lost the Force due to something called Magrok syndrome, which is a syndrome that causes Transdoshans to experience rage and aggression, and the mind's attempt to stave off the Lymphatic disease. Yep. Medical people, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it makes it impossible for him to connect with the Force. And this helps him in the plot of his book, by the way, because they're fighting this Force-eating entity called the Nameless that John and I have talked about before.
Right.
But yeah, just another way that it shows that like that seems to be the direction they're going in canon, that you create more confusion and pain and aggression to cloud the light side with just negative emotions. Yeah.
Which I think that's more interesting than having like magical talismans, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Otherwise, it's just I just don't think that's as interesting as doing it through the inherent weaknesses in being a good person, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and also just the fact that like the Sith have been, whatever this plan is, they've been concocting it now for 900 years. That was how long the rule of two has been in place since the collapse of the old Sith Empire and everything. So yeah, it's something you have to give them credit. It's something they've been building. And so thus it should not have a simplistic answer. It's something that has to grow over these centuries until they've reached the point to pounce.
Yeah.
So I found it really interesting just because we've been talking so much about like how much the lore of this show is or is not new. I actually found a Reddit post from 9 years ago, so not really that recent. And they say that basically this falling of the clouding of the Force, they say it's not. Oh, and this is, by the way, from Fantasy Liver. Fantasy Liver says this is not due to Darth Sidious's influence on the dark side. Darth Sidious being Sith in the next age, important Sith in the next age. It's due to the Jedi themselves. So keep in mind that the Sith have only had 2 members of their order for at least a millennium. How then does such a small order with nowhere near the resources of the Jedi manage to become so powerful, especially when in the Old Republic era there were thousands of Sith present and no Jedi mentions of their Force ability weakening? So this is due to the fact that the Sith Order is very adaptive and fluid to a modern world, while it is shown that the Jedi are held back by ancient traditions and a rigidity that has turned many of its members against the organization. The Jedi have not advanced their philosophy since the Old Republic era, and this stagnation manifests itself in their diminished Force ability. In the Clone Wars alone, and then we're going to skip that because so I just think it's interesting that like people are saying like, oh, this show is making people question the Jedi. Like, no, this is from 9 years ago, and this was already the storytelling people were picking up from Star Wars.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I was saying that I think that this is the most lore heavy Star Wars has been in a while. That's live action. I think the animated stuff has actually been the source of most of the lore drops in the last few years, and the books too. But as far as on screen,
yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And a lot of these people saying that this is all new just didn't watch that stuff, which, not everyone can watch everything or read everything or, it's just a massive amount of content.
Right.
But just if you think something might be new, maybe look it up because maybe it's not.
Right.
Right. And of course, we see also people sever the Force. We see this a lot later in the timeline. People do it intentionally because they've been traumatized or they want to like hide themselves in some way. We see very rarely, but especially in Knights of the Old Republic 2, someone's cut off from the Force by the Jedi Council.
Is that permanent?
Well, spoilers for KOTOR, but we're after that in the timeline, so
yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Pretty much.
I own KOTOR and I've been thinking about playing it, but I'm like, 1 time, 2, it is so dated. It's so hard.
Yeah.
So I did listen to a lot of your episodes with Bob with that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, maybe I'll just.
Well, that was the KOTOR episode was with Marchin.
What was with what?
Was with Marchin. He's a game player. Well, Bob plays games,
Bob.
But Bob doesn't. The Star Wars has not yet made their games accessible for the visually impaired.
Well, tell them get on it.
Yes.
Tell them if I can do my alt text in Notion, they can make their.
We have to shout out Cambrian Mammal on Twitter, who tweets at Star Wars once a day, every day, urging them to at least put alt text on their Twitter posts.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Good to give them that nudge.
Yes. Maybe someday they'll pay attention. They actually did it for like, okay, when there was, what was it, the Star Wars big convention in London, they did it for like a week and then stopped again.
Why?
I don't know.
That's bizarre. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully Star Wars Atlas. I will say, as much as Ubisoft has its issues, it is very good lately at accessibility. And now that they're making the new Star Wars game that's coming out in August, I think that will be something good.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. Even though it's not like, I do tend to like the Force users, and this one is the, the scoundrels. But it looks great, the world building and
yeah. I don't know. I really liked the Battlefront campaigns. So I think that I'm going to like this. I think I'm going to like it a lot.
Okay. So just, I wanted to mention two other like Force nullifiers is one from Canon and from the High Republic books. We've already talked about the Nameless, which are also Force Eaters. And also the Salamiri are from Legends from the Thrawn books, although we saw a statue of them in Rebels, the animated series.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I only learned about this creature recently because I read Heir to the Empire.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so they create like, they're almost like a steading in Wheel of Time terms, like where they create like a dome of where you just can't touch the Force.
Yeah, but it's not like suffering like the Nameless do. It's just... You're like,
no,
oh,
so
that's
these
weird.
are different.
I feel like I've lost something. Like I've lost like a sense. I'm blindfolded.
Right. Not that it like destroys you. Yeah.
Right.
But just, so it seems maybe just putting out there, these are the options that could be at play with what's been going on with Osha. But I think we're meant to understand it's mostly her own psychological trauma. And then she breaks through because she goes the easy way through the dark side. Is that what you took away from it?
Yeah, I think she's got some performance anxiety, and Chimere sees that, and he's going to play on that too.
Yeah. Well, should we get into the feedback and see what other people say?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Do you want to take the lead on the feedback?
Sure.
So people can hear another voice.
Sure. I know. I feel like because this is my second podcast of the day.
I'm a little like,
I don't know how much I have left of opinions.
We just, for anyone who's wondering, we just had a deep dive into the fifth element for Lorehound subscribers.
So I appreciate that you've carried a lot of this podcast.
I'm like, here's more lore. Eat it, love it.
Yeah, of course. It's the Miss Trunchbull cake, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted more lore? All right. John M., after episode 4, wrote in, the Kalnaka death lends even more credence to Vernestra being the Darth Tooth. Snakes are green, just saying.
So we know after episode 5, of course, we know that Vernestra is not Darth Tooth, but a lot of people are still really suspicious of her. And I thought it was really funny since snakes are green, just saying.
Yeah. E-Hoop, after episode 5, said, I think it's most likely Vernestra. She's some sort of witch. She's got the whip, and I think the light whips are witch stuff. But what if it's Osha? Well, here's how I could see it working. Osha either carried darkness in the beginning and saw the Jedi opportunistically, less likely, or slid down a dark path in the wake of the trauma of losing her family and blaming her sister. Possibly she already knew May was alive. Maybe she finds a Sith holocron that teaches her some stuff. She leaves the Jedi Order with the intention of getting revenge, or possibly innocently, and then finds a holocron and or learns that May is alive, while also getting all Sithy with it. She plots revenge and, disguising herself, recruits Chimere, who under her direction recruits May. She orchestrates the whole thing, intending to culminate with either becoming a dark side duo with May or taking revenge on May, who she believes is responsible for the deaths of her family, more likely. Maybe she's using Pip as a two-way holocon thingy. All right. Probably Pip is in some mode that doesn't remember. Pip most likely turns red, a la C-3PO, speaking the Sith language.
I mean, this was written, by the way, before this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. She stayed home on the night of the first murder to communicate with Chimere. In disguise, she holo projects instructions to Chimere. Things go awry when May learns Osha is alive and begins to repent. Osha has no plan for when the roles are reversed. At some point, Chimere becomes alarmed that his real master, Osha, hasn't made contact and tries to ping her. May is carrying Pip now, and we have a cut from Chimere trying to signal to Pip having a red light flash. Osha being afraid to stun May, but trying to recruit Yord is trying to whack her makes some sense. If she's trying to both use and kill May in the end, doesn't want her neutralized yet, always likes having someone else to do her dirty work. See Sith Lesson 1. Sith Lesson number 1 is that you have to kill the Jedi without weapons, which actually means getting someone else to do it, maybe via subterfuge. For instance, getting an Acolyte to do it for you, or a gazillion clone troopers. Well, you pull the strings from the shadows. I'm not aware that's a canon Sith lesson, but it should be. Or maybe it's from one of the witch cults. I'm not married to the idea, but I don't think it's completely implausible or meritless. And peace and good pods, Ehoop. Ehoop, do you believe in aliens in the real world? Because I feel like we've uncovered a conspiracy theory level to you that is it's new and I like it. I'm liking it.
I think it's not completely implausible, and we do have to say that they called out the fact that Pip's eyes were turned red, which is interesting. So I have two questions coming out of this. Like if someone gave Chimere the thing, you have to kill a Jedi without a weapon, and then Chimere passes it on to a new Acolyte, you have to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Is this like a kill a Jedi without a weapon pyramid scheme going on, or?
Could be anything. Nobody knows.
I still think kill a Jedi without a weapon is to like corrupt them, or
Yeah, I think so too. It's to get them to attack you unarmed, because we've heard that so many times, and even Soul says it in this episode.
Yeah, but I have a question about Pip based on all of this, which is where and when and from whom did she get Pip?
That's a good question too. I feel like this is so Soul notices this now, which means she couldn't have had it when she was a Jedi, right?
I guess. I mean, he has, to be fair, he's been spending a lot of time with her recently.
Yeah, but that was her master, so he would have known if she had that droid earlier.
Right, but he didn't say that she didn't, did he?
No, but I just feel like that's just a conversation that they would have had already.
I don't know.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe he gave it to her.
Good point there. But then I feel like he would call it Pip and not your droid.
Well, I think that was also because he knew he was talking to May at that moment.
Oh, true. Maybe he was trying to see if she'll say Pip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think my interpretation is that he knew the whole time that it was May, but he thought like I'll try, to get through to her while she's pretending to be Osha, and then at the moment she was like, actually, I'm gonna call the cops on you. He's like, okay, we're done.
Right. All right, Tom, after episode 5 said, "Hi, John and Elysia. I had a theory about Darth Thirstteeth claiming to be a Sith. I definitely think the theory that he himself is merely an apprentice is likely, but there was an angle/prediction I had that wasn't mentioned in the show. I'm wondering if the Sith claimants we see aren't actually Sith. If they are that, they will attend to the attention of the actual Sith hiding in the galaxy. I can't imagine they'd be happy that there's a group out there doing things in their name and riling up Jedi to be on the lookout and blow their cover. I could see if the current story is in a good place by season's end, that this season ends or next season begins with a confrontation of Chimere/his master, or even Chimere /his master receiving the Kelnaka treatment, where to parallel May finding Kelnaka dead, Osha finds Chimere or his master dead, with Darth Tenebrous or Plagueis stepping out of the shadows as the assailant. Would be a cool cliffhanger to end on, and would allow future diving into what the real Sith have been up to this whole time. Thanks for all the coverage. I've enjoyed catching up on the timeline and hearing your thoughts, Tom. P.S. I'm actually enjoying the spoiler policy. I'm somewhere in the middle of Elysia and John when it comes to Star Wars knowledge, so I take it as a cool way to quiz myself to see if I know what you're talking about.
Thank you, Tom. And we do have a special section at the end of the feedback where we get into more feedback about what people think about the spoiler policy. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yes, thank you, Tom. I like this idea that they're going to bait the Sith out. This is actually something that I think during the next era, there is a whole thing of what do we do if one of the former Sith becomes too loud?
Yeah.
That's a whole thing where a Sith Lord has to deal with that. Like there's PR for the Sith.
Yeah. I don't think that Chimeo's going to die this season, though. I think that they're going. I mean, I think they know that that's a draw to bring people back for season 2. But he's such a good. So I know people don't want him to be Plagueis, and I don't for the same reasons, which are vaguely like Plagueis is supposed to be a moon, and
Right.
is he the right age, and blah blah blah. But at the same time, if he were Plagueis, which it's canon, we don't really know much about Plagueis in canon, so it could be. If he were somehow that would be cool just because he's such a good villain and that's such an important name in Star Wars history that it would just be nice to have a really cool Plagueis. But I think it's more likely he's Venomous, who was Tenebrous' second acolyte, who he kind of tortured instead of. Yeah. He was like, no, you're not the one that I'm investing in. I'm just going to do experiments on you instead.
Fair enough. And again, this is something that we see recurring, right? Is that they give lip service to the rule of 2, but in the end, it's not really that. It's never really followed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always extras.
Right. All right, let's move on to Arthur. After episode 5 said, regarding the episode on Acolyte where you made reference to red shirts, here's a crossover opportunity. I recently saw a cartoon entitled something along the lines of Schrodinger's Crossover, where a bunch of red shirts were locked in a room with a bunch of Empire stormtroopers. Given the tropes. Given the tropes. See, there's too many TRO. This is again, we're on hour 4 of podcasting here. Given the tropes that red shirts are cannon fodder and that stormtroopers are incapable of hitting anything, what do you find when you unlock the room?
Did the bullets bounce off the walls? Because that might help the stormtroopers.
Right. I feel like both sides accidentally kill themselves rather.
Right. Yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah. I can't talk anymore. A gadding giraffe after episode 5 says, regarding the use of 2 lightsabers as discussed in the podcast, I remember in KOTOR 2, they talk about different styles the main character uses. So single, 2 blades, and double lightsaber. An NPC mentions that the twin and double blades were more slaughter per swing, and lightsabers were meant to be more defensive weapons than offensive. I've always taken this to mean that a Jedi defaulting to more than one saber would be seen as too aggressive or not sticking to the ideals of being a Jedi.
Yeah,
I'm going to push back on that. I don't think so. I think we see plenty of dual lightsabers for light side users.
I mean, we see some, but it is that's when you have the dual lightsabers. It's called Jarkai again, as we mentioned last week. We do see some, but I think it is known to be a more aggressive style. So one character we see do it is Ahsoka, and we won't spoil her plot, but yeah, she's we see it often with characters who are not like your traditional Jedi, at least, let's say.
Yeah. Also, I think that the whole point is that you only have 2 lightsabers if 2 kyber crystals call out to you.
Right, exactly. So that's probably the biggest thing limiting it for sure. Yeah.
Right. So the will of the Force is with the people who have 2 lightsabers.
Right. I guess that's so what does that say about Chimere?
Good question. Well, at the same time, Sith often get their lightsabers by taking them and corrupting them, right? So it's not the same as the way a Jedi, naturally finds their kyber crystal.
But not all Jedi do, because especially later in the timeline when, Jedi aren't doing things the same way for reasons. We see people just finding lightsabers or inheriting them, or at this point in the timeline, the dark saber is already being passed down from, Vizsla to Vizsla on Mandalore.
Right. Good points there.
Mandalore. Yeah. And we do know, by the way, that Leslie Headland said several times that Kreia, who's a character in the second Knights of the Old Republic game. So I talked through her whole story in that episode in the Canon Timeline podcast feed. But we know that she's a particular inspiration in this show for Leslie Headland. Leslie Headland said, like, I looked at Kreia, or Darth Treya, as she's called in Sith terms, and she's like, I'm taking some stuff from her. And one of the things she took from her is a lightsaber style known as Trakata. So Trakata is basically where you have a style where you take advantage of the fact that a lightsaber is one of the only melee weapons where you can retract the blade and put it back out again. So they use this resheathing and unsheathing motion to like kind of do a tricksy way. So we saw this happen with Jackie, where, you know, it's a second secret blade and then it just went pump, 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 punctured her real quick 3 times in a row. This would be called the flash slash move. Another move that they do in this Trakata is this pass the blade, where basically someone tries to block you with your blade. And so you pull your blade in so you can sneak behind it and then stick it out again. And there's also the unbalancing block, where you're blocking someone else. And then so they have their lightsaber against yours and they're leaning into it. So you quickly retract your blade and they fall forward because they're off balance now. But the thing is, not many people do this because both the Jedi and Sith look down on this, or at least they did in Legends, because they thought it's kind of like a cowardly, cheap move, cheating kind of.
Right. Interesting. Where was I? Because I scrolled down.
Oh, sorry. Reader Reborn.
Reader Reborn. So Chimere is either Vernestra's Padawan, not Imri,
who was her Padawan in the books. Yeah.
Okay. Or he's possibly any humanoid Sith Lord who ever existed, or something else. I'm just gonna put that out there, right? Like it could just be something else, and I like that if it is. Unless he's extended his life or used cryogenics, but Imri is blonde, so I don't think it's him. I do think Chimere extended his life or used cryogenics, though, and if it's cryogenics, he could be anybody.
Yeah, and I asked if it could be mind transference, and he said, "Ooh, hadn't thought of that." Puts Imri card back on the table. Also, both of Osha's mothers. Quote, "My mother could do that."
Oh yeah, it could get inside the head. I would like that. I would like that if it's
it should like, what back, yeah.
Oh man, what if?
But it can't be But it can't be one of the mothers in Chimere though, because then it's really creepy when he looks at her and says desire and pops the grape.
Oh yeah, I don't like that. You're right. Yeah. You're right. And Star Wars isn't going to do that. Disney's not greenlighting that.
Right. This is not Westeros.
Right. Even in Westeros, I don't think that's going to
fly. Not parents and children. Maybe uncles and cousins and brothers. Yeah.
Right. Abby, after episode 6, says, Vernestra is definitely Chimere's former master. I think she knows who did the destruction on Kofar. Will we see next her attempts to spin another story to look good to the Senate? Her Padawan, Mog, sounded sycophantic. Already suggested that Soul might be responsible. At least, and Abby had a little smirk face there. At least they collected the bodies for burial. On the Darth Thirst /Scar/Desire side, oh my, Manny. Star Wars is really horny, isn't it? And then she pointed out that the creatures are called Skura.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is the horniest Star Wars has ever been, and I don't hate it.
It's as horny as Maul.
Yeah, we did get a proper sex scene of sorts in Andor.
That's true.
I like Star Wars growing up.
Jean says, I mean, the show is hitting all cylinders for me, and this mystery has got me hooked. Cliffhangers were staples pre-streaming and all. But I had all but forgotten how upsetting and exciting those abrupt endings had me. LOL. Chimere is such a very dope character, though. He keeps saying things that have me convinced that he's not Sith, but he very much has Sith tendencies. LOL. What's going on? I love Jean's use of LOL because it lets me go lol.
Yeah, I would say lol.
Tra-la-la-la-la-la. Thanks, Jean. I agree. The cliffhangers I have mixed feelings about.
I kind of love them. It's fun. I mean, as long as like I think they're going to wrap it. She said they're going to wrap it up this season and, leave some teases for a planned season 2. But as long as it's nothing obnoxious at the end of the season, I love a weekly cliffhanger where I can be like, ooh, but what's going to happen next? Although I am a little annoyed. I'm like, Saul, frickin' tell your story already.
I know. Look, I'll be happy as long as I'm not left with the identity of the stranger being, I am good. Remember Rings of Power?
Yes.
That was a whole thing, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that with the other stranger.
It's, so by the way, I have to say that the other stranger in Rings of Power, sorry, I'm going to say a spoiler for the first season of Rings of Power now, which came out over a year ago. But I was really resistant at first that it would be Gandalf. I really wanted to be a blue wizard or something, but by the end, it was like, well, yeah, of course it's Gandalf. It makes sense. I'm on board. And I think it's the same with Chimera. I was like, oh, I don't want it to be Chimera. Let it be someone less obvious. But then the reveal of Chimera happened. I'm like, oh, yeah, no. This is perfect.
Right. I hear you. I'm with it. All right, Rocky Zim says, interesting episode. Part of me wondered if he is an whole old Sith Lord like Exar Kun. Maybe he was possessed by Kun and was lured away from Ro. Wishful thinking on my part. LOL. Lol.
Yeah. So Ro is Vernestra's last name. And Exar Kun, we talked about him in the Old Republic overview, I believe, or maybe anyway. He was he was a former Jedi who turned to the dark side, became a Sith Lord. He lived like thousands of years before this, but it's not impossible that he was in stasis or that he entered the mind of somebody else.
Right.
We did mention in the Old Republic overview that Exar Kun is probably most famous for inventing the double-bladed saber.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Davey Mack says, so we end up with Sol saying he's going to tell all and Osha putting on the helmet. I'm wondering if the sensory deprivation that Chimera talked about might help Osha clear her mind of any fiddling the Jedi may have done with her memory. So then next episode, we simultaneously get Sol's story and Osha's true memory of what happened. I don't know if the Jedi messed with her memory or just withheld information.
Yeah, I think probably because we saw her side of things and she just had a limited view of what happened.
Right. I think it's more interesting that way, right? Just like a comedy of errors kind of thing.
Yeah, she was mostly in her room and missed everything. She just heard like a scream and, and whatever the drama with her sister was.
Right. All right. Thomas C. says, I just found you and I'm head over heels.
Wait, did you say Duve 71?
Oh, I've missed Duve. I can't miss Stu. Duve 71 says, I am having some time to think. My latest theory is Chimera is Vernestra's fallen Padawan picked up by Darth Tenebris, discarded early on. Chimera wanders the unknown regions and finds Ren. Ren gives Chimera his philosophy and more training. Chimera wants some payback on both the Sith and the Jedi, so he plays a very long game. Okay, I'm into that. I'm into this this Knights of Ren relationship.
This is kind of where I am, where I'm like, well, I think, maybe he was a Jedi and he was a Sith and he was like rejected from both and then found this new philosophy, which might be connected to the Nihil. I'm still putting that theory on the table.
Fair enough. Thomas C. says, I just found you and I'm head over heels. Thanks for the passion and thank you for not falling into the Let's Hate Star Wars category. Would love to hang out and bring all my action figures. Well, Thomas, tell you what. You help spread the word about the Lorehounds, and you get us to all like 1 million downloads a month, and we will throw a LoreCon, and there will be an action figure. There will be an action figure station.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the second time we promised 1 million downloads an episode, and we got LoreCon.
Yep.
All right. It's out
Marilyn, after episode 5, said, I would not say that the dark is needed for the existence of light, nor for balance. Balance is needed because the dark exists. In the Star Wars universe, I've yet to see the dark being used for love or for good, but it could be possible. To my mind, the dark manifests when people make harmful choices.
Wait, can I just say real quick? Yeah. I said on the Discord to this that I wondered if the creation of Osha and May could be the dark being used for good.
And didn't Chimera heal her too?
Yeah, it's unclear because I thought it looked like he did a little bit, but she did still have she wasn't completely healed this episode, but I don't know. Unclear.
But we have seen in the books, I've noticed that there are times where a Jedi says, "Hey, I can do a little bit of healing. I'm not great. I will make sure that you're stable, and then we'll get you to a real medic."
Yeah, exactly.
So that could be a thing.
Yeah.
To my mind, the dark manifests when people make harmful choices. Anger, fear, violence all exist, and one must learn how much of those things they carry within themselves and decide how they are going to recognize and accept them without letting them be in control. Not to mention doing the work of whatever healing they can of those wounds. Of course, darkness in and of itself serves a very important function in nature. Bulbs, seeds, and roots could not function without darkness beneath the soil. We are conceived and carried within the darkness of wombs. Digestion happens in darkness, and it is only when the sun's light is blocked that we can see the other stars in the sky. But these things are not about moral judgments or behaviors. We have chosen the binary light and dark to represent a moral framework, but that is distinct from a natural framework. Of course, your mileage may vary.
So I have to say just about that in general is that I do think the idea maybe in the beginning was like the more black and white sort of fantasy storytelling that used to be more popular, and now in general the world is like fantasy fans are more interested in gray storytelling, and Star Wars has also drifted in that direction. We see in this show especially, we see that like Chimera confronts Saul and he's like, well, it's not that you don't have darkness, it's that you're trying so hard to deny it that it's getting in your own way. So
right.
in a bit.
Right.
And it actually reminds me of a conversation Luke and I had about the end of the Beacon 23 show. And I won't spoil the ending, but one aspect of it is that there's an entity that wants to create another entity to be as non-threatening as possible, and there's something like, and they come across as benevolent, but there's also just something highly sinister in that when we completely deny the sad sides of ourselves. Well, first of all, the lighter sides don't shine as brightly without that contrast of shadow.
Right.
But it's just unhealthy also, and it just always backfires. So I think that it is about the balance in terms of like the Jedi are not right to say the anger doesn't exist, and not that they say it, but you're not right to completely deny yourself of it, because there is use to these emotions,
right,
as outlets and other reasons.
Yeah, and there is also the the problem, honestly, that George Lucas has specifically said, "Oh, well, actually, the light side is balance in Star Wars. Like the dark side is not part of the balance." And I don't think I agree with him about
everything
his own...
else. So I don't.
I know.
Yeah, I you're the only one who's told me about that, and I believe you, but I choose to ignore that because it makes no sense with anything else.
This is like this is on the level of Tolkien saying that the Lord of the Rings isn't an allegory for anything.
Right.
Like it's just I think sometimes you're just too close to your work and you can't see what it is from a distance.
Right. Well, it's also, you go through phases where you doubt things. Like I think of with Interview with the Vampire, Anne Rice at one point, she became uber Christian. She's like, "Oh no, there's not gays in my books." And then, but her own son is gay too. And then later on, she like course corrected, and she's like, "Oh wait, no, sorry. Like here's some extra gays to make up for that."
All right. Interview with the Vampire aside, Marilyn continues. I think Soul didn't tell Osha what happened on the planet sooner because she wanted to be a Jedi, but was experiencing blockage from the trauma of what she had experienced on Brendock, and this interfered with her training. Whatever Soul knows is highly unlikely to have produced greater balance within Osha, I think, or else he would have told her early on. Then she left before he could tell her what happened, and he decided to leave it at that. It's also possible that the political side of the Jedi organization decided the less said about Brendock, the better. I will neither condemn nor defend that choice. So much depends on the wider political climate at the time, what the Jedi were going through, and what they had recently been through. And many thanks to Elysia for asking her friend to ask a friend to give her reactions to possible Yoruba influences over the witchcraft we were seeing on Brendock. I had recognized the similarities between the name Osha and the Yoruba goddess Oshun, But I had no idea if the showrunners are deliberately using that echoing or if it's just, to their minds, a logical nickname derived from her full name, which escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite possible. There are like these little Easter eggs like that in terms of naming. It's quite possible they might have intentionally, because Ocean is the Oshun, in spelled in English at least, is the fertility goddess. And the thing about May and Osha are that they are like some sort of unnatural birth.
Right.
So it seems like, yeah, there's a good chance there was a link there on purpose.
Yeah, that's interesting. Marilyn says, after episode 6, dang, they are being so mean to us. As soon as Soul said, I'm going to tell you, and the music started, I thought, no. But I was right. It feels like TV of the 1950s and 60s to be continued. Yeah, that's my biggest complaint. I know you like it, Elysia. Don't worry. We don't have to re-argue it. I think Vernestra was Chimere's master. Something to tip the scales, she said, of the massacre, i.e. to shift the political opinion against the Jedi, which was already beginning to happen as shown in that brief scene with the senator. And I really did not need that view of dear dead Jackie. Though I'm glad someone took care of the bodies. Could an island with cortosis, which really sounds like a medical condition rather than an ore or metal, truly be known if it's truly be unknown if it's so dangerous to Jedi? I know it's a big galaxy, and this is, I believe, the Outer Rim. Osha as Pandora and the helmet as temptation. Don't go for the unknown that's dangled by a dark warrior. But didn't her breathing just sound like a certain Darth blank?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, about cortosis. Yeah, this is in the Outer Rim, but I think it's rare enough that, and this is like early enough in the timeline where they haven't fully explored the Outer Rim, and a lot of the Outer Rim was behind this so-called storm wall for a while because of the conflict with the Nihil 100 years before this. So yeah, I can see it's possible they just don't know where this is. Actually, Marilyn, she kindly wrote in to talk in an episode that we'll have released just before this. I'll talk about this at the end of the podcast, on the Canon podcast timeline. And I read a passage in it that's from a myth set at the beginning of the Star Wars timeline, that just kind of reminds you how in the middle of nowhere space was to them, and what an unknown thing it was. It was like exploring the Outer Rim, especially before this. But it was like going into the ocean and just hoping you find land.
Right. And the Outer Rim is one thing. There's also other threats to the Jedi, like the Nameless, that were not known before the High Republic era. So there's plenty going on that the Jedi are not aware of.
Right.
All right. Let's move on to Maureen D. You said, I'm wondering when the premise of the Jedi having a legal right to take children came into lore. I've always seen this as something the family had the option to approve. I haven't read any of the books. I've always seen the search for reincarnations of the Buddha as inspiration for testing children with the Force.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That I mean, they ripped that in Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it's in here too.
Yeah. George Lucas said, that there were definitely Buddhist influences on the Jedi ideology.
Right. And Marilyn says, again, I'm wondering if this sort of stance is a reflection of some previous very challenging conflict with the Nihil, maybe? I've heard Elysia talking about that in the context of the Jedi themselves, but I would be interested to know the wider implications for the Republic. I also would like to know more about how much authority the Republic has at this point, and just how extensive that particular confederation was. Was the Outer Rim considered wild at this point?
Yeah, so they had actually made it further into the Outer Rim until the Nihil forced them to retreat. So it is kind of pretty wild out there in the Outer Rim. And indeed, because of this conflict, it did lead to them pressing children to become Padawans and Padawans to become Jedi at a younger age in order to confront that. And I think the effect that it had on the Republic is that the Republic did not have a standing army at this point. During the High Republic, they just kind of like would try to do the thing. Oh, when a conflict comes up, everyone has to send soldiers from every planet in the Republic,
Right.
Which is a great idea, but doesn't necessarily always work the way you want it to.
I mean, that's a traditional, like, medieval feudal style military, right?
Exactly. But I think basically what we're seeing is why the Republic and the Jedi start working more closely together and start looking more like the same entity.
Yeah, which I think is an intentional sloppy. It's an intentional obfuscation of what the Jedi are by the Sith.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about the feedback from last week, top of last week, about the structure of the podcast. It seems like you have a lot of notes here, so I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. Well, I'll read this first one, and then you can read the other three. But so the first one, the other three were, I think, all email feedback or Discord feedback. The first one was a 3-star review left on the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast feed on Apple. And the review says, spoiler, there's no spoilers. I love the Lorehounds for their in-depth knowledge and insights into stories, but the Star Wars Acolyte pod is so spoiler restricted that it loses what makes the Lorehounds great, the lore. So, yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, you're free to give me whatever kind of review you want. And of course, it's not your problem if it hurts my search rankings and makes it harder for the fledgling podcast to find new listeners. But I do have to push back a little bit on the idea that the podcast lacks lore, because I thought maybe it was the opposite that was the problem, that maybe there was too much lore. So I think there's an abundance of lore. I think it's the fact that we're not talking about specifically the movies you've seen directly that's throwing you, and I get that. I wonder if it helps to think about it similarly to how in the House of the Dragon podcast, John, you've read Fire and Blood. But for David and for the listeners who have not, you don't say future spoilers in that pod. Right. So it's kind of a similar deal here. Like, it's not, you might say in Fire and Blood, people know this Alice Rivers is going to be interesting. But you're not going to say like, well, this is what her story plays out. So I don't know. I wonder if thinking about it that way helps with the people who are feeling similarly to not Qbert.
Yeah, I think people just aren't used to. They aren't used to looking at Star Wars this way because it's always been told out of order, and this is just a unique way to tell Star Wars. And I think it's a really interesting way, and it hasn't been done before. And there's so many resources that are already like, here's all the references to later, and so we're trying to not be the wiki, and we're trying to. We're trying to do our own thing.
Give you a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But your feedback, it's been noted in the balance of feedback. So yeah, definitely, as always, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And if anyone else has any more thoughts you want to share, then the inbox swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com is open. And I definitely want to hear them. And if anyone does enjoy the way that we're covering the lore on this podcast and feels willing and able to leave a review on the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast feed, wherever you're listening, it would be a huge help in getting this little podcast stream that I've been developing over the past couple of years off the ground. So yeah, reviews that encourage people to listen are very much appreciated. If that's not how you feel, obviously, then,
Right.
But for anyone who does, thank you in advance. I love you.
All right. Chris M. writes in and says, hello, Elysia. I have never written in or anything, but felt compelled after hearing the feedback you shared about spoilers from lore dumps. I have loved Star Wars for as long as I remember. As a youngling, I would read Star Wars encyclopedias and would love to know all the little things, trivia questions, and the like. I would watch the original trilogy movies over and over. I loved it. Although, as time moved forward, I continued to watch theatrical releases and love Star Wars, but I didn't make time for the lore. I play trading card games, and recently a fantastic game called Star Wars Unlimited was released, and it's very fun and very good. That's interesting. I've been eyeing that one. I just don't want to spend money on another game.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone else who was playing it.
Anyhow, this game got me to become intrigued with the lore again and catch up on all that I've missed. So I started watching Rebels, and it's fantastic. But there is still so much more. What's next? How do I catch up? Well, your coverage has helped immensely with that. your Timeline podcast, and your lore dumps on the Acolyte coverage provide a very thorough and concise way for me to consume lore and catch up with the Star Wars universe. But most importantly, I really feel it really fills out my understanding of the Acolyte episodes themselves. Knowing the lore behind factions, races, time periods, and whatever really, really helps it all come together. So please don't stop, for all the podcasts I listen to that are a supplement to a TV series are for that purpose, to fill in gaps that I may have missed and to simply better understand the content. A bit of a ramble, but I simply wanted to express that the lore dumps help me enjoy and understand the show more and are important to me as a fan of Star Wars in general. I am with the Lorehounds for lore. It's quite simple, and you are doing a fantastic job with all of your coverage since it began. Keep it up. Hoping I can record my Wookiee call at some point for you.
Yay!
Did you ever see, I might have brought this up on a previous podcast, but did you ever see that whole thing where like this guy was mad at his ex-wife after a contentious
You told
divorce?
me that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's so funny. It's like,
but for anyone who didn't hear the story, he got a bunch of people to call her in Wookiee sound.
No, he put up posters that said, "Please call my phone and do your best Wookiee impression. I really want to hear it." Which, look, don't do that. Don't do that. But also, it's hilarious in hindsight.
It is funny.
All right.
Well, so yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, I thought, John, that you'd be excited about that. I'm pretty sure you're probably the one who talked Chris into watching Rebels.
Oh, Rebels! I'm a Rebels stan. I actually think, I think that the consistent good episodes of Rebels are stronger than the Clone Wars. I think the Clone Wars highs are really high, but its lows are real low. And Rebels doesn't have that low. I think it's a really, really solid show from start to finish.
Yeah, it's true. Everyone should watch it if they haven't yet.
Yep. Bango31 says, listening to episode 5 podcast and the chat about including some more High Republic content, please do. I've only read the adult novels, which I'm not particularly impressed by, and I still feel like I don't know what the fuck is happening in the timeline. Yeah, the adult novel, you really got to read the YA novels at least, because it's really incomplete. I don't know why they have them on like a separate track. They really should just all be included in the main track.
Yeah, I mean, in the junior, I think a lot of people don't want to read the junior novels and I was the same way, like because they called junior novels. So I'm like, well, I'm too old for that. But then actually some of the junior reading has been like the myths that I talk about in my canon myths of Ancient Batu episode that just came out right before this. Those are technically junior myth, like, junior aged myths, but they're just lovely little stories. Actually, it doesn't feel like a kid thing. There are child books, that's different, but
nice. Bango31 says, wait, no, I just read that one. It's been a long day, guys, already.
Last one.
Reader Reborn says, I don't think it has to do with casual versus hardcore at all. I think part of the appeal of the Acolyte is that it's disconnected from the Skywalker saga. The who extremist haters aside, that's probably the biggest reason some good faith fans aren't working with it. Swinging it back around to the podcast, that disconnect from the future of the timeline, I think, is refreshing in the same way I think the Acolyte is refreshing. Every other podcast, even the good ones, spent a bunch of time talking about Anakin and the prophecy after episode 3, for instance. Instead, you kept the focus tight. In short, what you are doing is amazing and unique, and please don't change. There you go. Listen, this is you and I talked after we got that first email.
Right.
And for me, I'm like, you have to just be unapologetic with the podcast you want to make. Mm-hmm. Because if you start changing based on every review, it's just going to be a problem. Right. Like if there's legitimate critique and you want to like take some of that into account, sure, but tweak it, don't change it,
Right. Right. No, I mean, and that's why I think it's like I keep saying it's the balance, the power of many. But it is the balance of the different like opinions where we find the happy place. And if so, we had one person who complained it's not enough lore, but I don't think that's really what they meant. Although that is what people who look for the feed are going to see first,
right?
But I think for the most part, it seems like. And someone else who complained about lore being too much. And then it seems like other people are like, no, this is a happy medium. This is what I'm looking for. And since it's what I was looking to do, because what it's like I said, I think of myself as the first listener, because if I'm not making it for myself as a listener, then, who am I targeting? So yeah, just trying to find the happy medium between that. And I appreciate everyone's patience and being willing to go along the journey and find their fun in it. I liked hearing like someone likes to quiz themselves about, what are they talking about? Yeah. So I mentioned already that on the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast feed, just before this, a day before this in the public feed, I released a new episode but I backdated it to May. So this is the beginning of my backdating experiment. So I know how that's going to show up in some podcatchers, but not in others. So I'd love to hear if that like popped up with a notification for people if you're a subscriber to that feed, or how that worked. But you might have to scroll back to toward the beginning of the overall podcast list, because this is it's Ancient Myths. It's set at the very, very beginning of the timeline. And yeah, in addition, in my Canon Ancient Myths of Planet Batuu, there are updates on the Dawn of the Jedi film. And there's our first mailbag episode with Bob showing back up to share some of his spoiler-free Acolyte thoughts too. And also, while I was doing research for this episode, I found more about like the nature of the Force, which is something some people have been asking about. So I do a little dive into how that's been talked about in various, especially books at the end.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And then on the rest of Discord, you guys are deep in it with Hot D. So now you're doing what, 3 Hot D episodes a week? Yeah,
it's kind of stupid, but it's fun. It's good. It's good. It's good content. We're doing our hot takes Sunday night. We're doing the main, and the hot takes are Patreon and Supercast exclusive. We're doing the main coverage for that, which was like 2.5 hours this week, and then another hour and a half feedback episode just released.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Yeah,
doing a lot.
All the way in on House of the Dragon, but I think most of the audience is too. So
yeah, and of course, Second Breakfast. We just released that 2.5 hours on that one too for hotel breakfasts,
and also a new form of raw dogging.
It's not what you think, I promise. It's
you and I had
safe for work ish.
I mean, yeah. And and then we also just filmed, like we said right before this, our new 11Zs I filmed it, recorded it, whatever. we put
I hope nobody had a camera on me. I didn't brush my hair yet today.
We recorded it about The Fifth Element. It's our new monthly extra movie breakdown for subscribers. So that was fun.
It was fun.
I love that movie. You were okay. David was meh.
Yeah, we definitely had the Goldilocks treatment on that podcast, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, and we've got Rings and Rituals is wrapping up. They're getting toward the end of the season 1.
Oh, they finished season 1.
Oh, they finished season 1. Oh, I haven't listened to the last episode yet.
I'm going to be on next week. I have to edit it still. But I'm going to be on with Marilyn next week talking about the music of season 1.
Ooh,
and then
cool.
I know they're going to have a feedback episode. So you still have a little time to get in the feedback. Go write it into ringsandrituals@thelorehounds.com.
Okay.
And then Radioactive Ramblings is also doing The Boys.
Right.
They are doing season 4, episode 5 this week. Other than that, I think that's it for our affiliates right now. Everybody else is on a break, including you on Will Shift Dust.
Yes. Yeah. There's still definitely, if you haven't yet, check out that interview with Glenn Mazzara, because that was just really interesting, even if you didn't watch Beacon 23. But we're going to be back soon there with Dune coverage.
Nice.
As soon as I'm a little less overwhelmed with the Acolyte.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us for this breakdown of episode 6. Can't wait to come back with episode 7. Are we putting our money on free will or choice for the title?
I hope it's free will. I feel like that's more interesting of a title.
Right. Well, it's their choice, or is it? I guess it's predetermined. We'll find out next week. See
Fair
you all
enough.
then.
Bye. Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black.
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.